and there could be an area here where we could actually look at our key risk indicators and see how to improve that and maybe help us to project better in the future. Yeah. Good. I think that was good. Looking at that was the first area of risk that we looked at, and this, as I said, we had looked at several documentation coming from the World Economic Forum, Business Continuity Institute, IRM, and so on and so forth. And this really came out strong as one of the areas of risk that was prevalent this year. Now, the other area of risk that is also prevalent is the area around operational risk, looking at especially business continuity, loss resulting from unplanned or failure of processes, people, and internal systems. And I'd like Mercy to take us through this. Just give us your insights, and then let's have a discussion on it.
Yeah, I think for operational risk, it's one of the risks that any company cannot run away from. Yeah. Because I mean, if you don't have any operational risk, then I don't know how you're operating. So it's one of your key. The likes of Nakumatt and even Haku Industries a while back. If you look at them, the control lapses that they have or the issues that they had, it was because of operational risks. I mean, operational failures. So it's as risk practitioners, then it's a key thing where your focus needs to be on to help your companies or your entities that you're serving to ensure that you have proper control management and to be able to address those risks as and when they increase. Yeah.
Anything to add?
I think also if you're looking at operational risk, one of the things that I find probably is maybe a bit of a failure is the understanding of the 3 lines of defense. Many organizations understand, my operations need to be tip-top, then I need to have a risk function, then I need to have an audit function. So by the time you then have, a situation where it becomes a Nakumatt, where you're going under, you're almost discovering it at the last minute when you couldn't have done much about it. So an understanding of, the 3 lines of defense and making sure that your processes are strong. The first line also understands what risk is, and they're able to assess the risks of their processes is quite key in making sure that you reduce your operational risk.
Yeah, maybe just from a different angle. I know we discuss the impact of the climate and everything, but I just want to create a connection, especially this part of the world, in terms of operational disruption.
Yes.
So if you look at the last 2 years, many businesses have been interrupted operational. We began in last year, lots of political disruptions, where businesses lost a lot of time because they had to shut down to pave way for political demonstrations. And beyond losing time, losing financial value because of vandalism and the effects of such a thing. Fast forward to this year, and I know we'll talk about this in detail.
Yes.
We are having a lot of businesses which are disrupted by weather.
Yes.
So El Nino is there.
Yeah.
So either roads have been cut off, so you cannot travel, or offices have been flooded, so you cannot attend. And your IT systems and people are interrupted because of that. So operational risks, I think there are a lot of interdependencies when you look at it for any business. So as risk practitioners and as organizations, then we need to really map out the interdependencies that impact on our operations.
Maybe just to also add on what Stella was talking about, the 3 lines of defense. As some companies become more mature, more of second line, or what we do as risk practitioners is moving to the first line. Yes. So as a risk practitioners, we have to show or demonstrate value to as to why we are actually there.
Yeah.
Because risk can be managed by first line.
Yes.
And then be assured by third line.
Yes. Yes.
So as a second line,
Yeah.
you need to actually demonstrate that you're adding value to the organization. Yeah.
It's an interesting point you talk about value that risk managers provide in an organization. And I think it would be good for the viewers to just indicate, if you can just give us an indication of how many of you actually have an enterprise risk management department or function that is, that is actually charged with the role of risk management in your organization. So it'd be good to just get an insight of that from all of you. But now, when you're looking at operation risk, there is definitely an opportunity, right, in managing risk. So, as you say, why are you there in risk management? Why is it? Are we able to identify, or maybe just a feeling from yourselves? How do you feel from your experience that risk managers actually contribute to the identification of opportunities, exploitation of opportunities in organizations?
I could give a very quick highlight from my own organization at CPF. So the value given by the second line of defense, that's risk management and assurance services, is that the first line of defense is really complacent about things. So we offer the early warning assistance.
Okay.
So I'll give an example from we all got the warning from the Met department.
Yes.
Okay, they gave it, then we do it, then put it back.
Yes.
But so the whole idea of a risk management function will be to study such early warnings and then give advisory to management, because in a way risk may not be able to do the operational function but actually implement some of the mitigations.
Yes.
But you need to give early warnings and advisory in terms of what kind of impact are we expecting from such events. So the weather and climatic condition is just one.
Yeah.
It could be cyber security, it could be political changes that you can predict to the organization in terms of the impact that we have and what they need to do to mitigate. So that's, I think, one of the value I see in the second line.
Just before we move on, something I noted is, so as Sentinel, we do outsource risk management services. So we were having a discussion with a client recently, and this client was giving us insights about, what is happening in their industry, what is changing, and everything. So often, as risk managers, if we are not in the right room, where the right type of discussions are being made, and the discussions which are actually going to affect the strategy, then the type of risks you will be identifying would be disconnected with what the organization is feeling. So again, as organizations and even as risk managers, you have to fight for a place in the right room.
Pretty interesting. I mean, since we have people probably who are looking at having careers in risk management, what do you think is a good background for somebody?
I think because risk management has different facets. So I think anybody who has a passion for risk can actually learn risk. Because you can have IT risk practitioners, you can have operational risk practitioners, and then you can have, let's say, the more specialized, especially for banks, so you have credit risk analysts. So of course, those ones will be a niche market, and somebody who has that credit risk background or accounting background. But especially for operational risk, it's something that anyone can be able to learn, so long as you have understood the basics, the basic concepts of risk management. It's something that you can easily fit into and gel if you learn. But there are a lot of certifications that are offered or training courses, fundamentals like PineBridge, so IRM also does that. For ISACA, we have basic IT risk courses that we have an IT risk fundamental certificate that one can do. So it's all about the passion. I don't think you can say it's restricted to a certain background.
So okay, that's good. So taking me from there, because you mentioned some certifications and certifications, and I have been reading through your profiles, and you guys have very rich credentials, C something, C standing for certified. How have those contributed to your body of knowledge in terms of risk management? What should someone say? Because they will be spending a lot. So is it worth it? So maybe just from your point of view, how do this contribute to your ability to actually be a good risk practitioner?
Thanks for mentioning the certifications that I am asking.
Yes.
I mean, I'm one of those who is a living testimony.
Yes.
Yeah. Because when I began my practice in risk, and this is a story for many people who started, because risk is pretty young.
Yes.
I didn't have any certifications.
Yes.
So I look back and I wonder, what was I doing? Woman should not hear this. But they didn't know that anyway. So after undertaking the certification, mine more the IRM side, Institute of Risk Management. So there's a IRM side, which is a certificate in risk management, and then followed by the diploma, international diploma in risk management. Eye-opening, honestly. So anybody thinking of joining the risk function or risk practice should definitely get the certifications, because you start at a slightly much higher level than anybody who does not have the requisite knowledge.
Yeah.
Very crucial.
That's good. That's good. Any addition?
Yeah, I think then also certifications just go to demonstrate that you're actually qualified.
Yeah.
And it gives you an edge over, say, your competitors or other people. And also it gives you global respect. So IRM, ISACA have various certifications that are recognized anywhere, not just in Kenya where you do it. That's true.
That's good. I think also it's good to just add, because we have an audience who cut across vision, that right now we have a lot of this available online.
Yes.
So we are able to get access to all this content, the trainings, the course material, the exams can all be done online. So which really has leveled the playing field, as it were.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good point. Now, to go to the next area of ops risk, you can talk about it until tomorrow. I mean, it's a lot of things. It's very broad, as you mentioned, and all organizations actually have to really think about. But let's talk a bit about certain area around regulation. I think we have seen, especially in this part of the world, new regulation around data protection, data privacy. The law coming out in Kenya in 2019, November, October. Same year in Uganda, I think in February 2019, coming out in Rwanda 2021, the law. I know in Tanzania, it is probably just waiting for promulgation of sign off by the president, if it hasn't already. I saw Swahili version, which I really struggled. I really struggled to read. I was really struggled to read it, but yes, I saw a draft. I think also there's a draft in Somalia being discussed in Parliament. So, of course, then this basically means that we're looking at push at least on data protection and privacy in the region and to join the global community. So, just looking at this and other compliance risks, maybe it's also just to hear from you. What is your take on this and how has it been in 2023?
So, thank you, Musa. Just to broaden the topic, if you look at the last 1 year or so, actually the last 2 years, not just the data protection.
Yes.
This year there has been a push for laws related to money laundering and the process of crime.
Yeah.
Again, the push is coming from both within and outside. So there's need for the country to align, just as we meant to align with GDPR and the data privacy and protection. So the AML laws are also coming from an international perspective, where Kenya needs to align with international laws. This seems to be compliant with the issues of money laundering. Beyond money laundering and data protection, if you look at regulatory changes, legal and regulatory changes in Kenya, I was actually relating it to the acronym VUCA,
Yes.
It's become a bit volatile. Not a bit actually, a lot volatile, uncertain, very complex.
Yes.
And ambiguous to some extent. So one of those which we want to center in is the Finance Act
Yes.
of Kenya. The industry waits in bated breath for the reading of the Finance Act or Finance Bill every year in Parliament, because it signals the changes of a lot of regulations, a lot of laws, just as we saw this time around. Again, connecting this to the issue of the manifesto that we talked about earlier.
Yes.
NHIF now, which is SHIF, the new NSSF Act of 2013, which just came into force this year. The housing levy and the laws related to that. So if you look at regulatory and compliance related risks, I think the acronym VUCA best defines them. So we are operating in a very uncertain environment. We don't know what the law will pretend to know. So again, organizations are left in a very dicey situation. As such, I think as risk practitioners, we need then to advise our boards and our management to be ready as we wait for the government maybe to heed the advice of professionals to regulate or to stabilize the regulatory framework within the country. Because it's not a very fair framework for any business to operate in. So I just thought that from a risk perspective, it's not just the data protection or AML Act. I think it's a lot more of the regulatory conundrum, if you can put it, that has been happening in the country that exposes our businesses to not only uncertainty, but also a lot of financial implications around it. If you look at some of the ones you mentioned, whether it's NSSF, NHIF, or SHIF, and the housing levy. So this is a co-contributory sort of a regulation that has been put in place, something that many businesses have not planned about. All of a sudden you have to make provisions for it. And the nature of most of these laws is that they have been coming into force without any warning. So the day the president signs it into law, they almost want to backdate it and say, it's applicable either immediately or from last month. So they are not giving businesses head warnings or head starts to try and plan for it. I would imagine ideally it will give businesses room to plan and say this will be applicable in the next 1 year. It's not the case. And perhaps the last thing I want to point out in terms of this risk, it will be both current and emerging, and we should expect more because there's a high appetite by the government to raise funds. So if I was to single out the AML laws, there's something in government, I think they call it appropriations made. So these are targets that most most institutions or parastatals are given by government to raise additional funds for them. And as it is, we've had signals and warnings from the National Treasury that this government may be broke. I don't want to speak on behalf of the government, but that's what we read in the papers. So internally within government, they have been issued targets to raise as much funding as possible. So just like we saw in Europe with maybe something like GDPR when it came into force, the big companies, Facebook, Google, has heavy fines. So locally, the government won't mind fining and raising funds from some of these laws. I think the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner has already led the way by issuing some fines to schools, entertainment joints, and the like. So predicting this, expect to see more of it next year. Heavier fines, more fines. A party organization may be one of them. So as a risk practitioner, then you need to be prepared to comply, or you will actually be fined. And you will face financial losses.
I think also just to chime in on that discussion, one of the things that I've seen in the reviews I have done is that there is a lot of, let me say in terms of compliance backpassing, where you say this is not my role, it's legal's role. This is not my role. If it's a role to do with NHIS, SHIF, then it's HR's role. So there is no one actually who takes, let me say, ownership of what is our compliance landscape looking like. So if you ask many institutions, where are you on the various laws that are out there? There is no one person who takes ownership and says, we are compliant up to this level. And, when it comes to compliance, it has to be first led by someone and then involving everybody. And that I see as something that really lacks in most of our organizations.
Yeah, just on that, I think what we were discussing earlier on the macroeconomic risks and what Sosita was saying about the ambitious agendas that the current government has, it's all kind of related, because then that has a trickle effect on the geopolitical risks, so to say, and then now we have all these new laws getting implemented. So, as Stella is rightly putting it, we have to collaborate with other departments. Some functions or some companies have risk and compliance separate. Some have it a bit intertwined. If you're able to anticipate and start doing impact analysis on, let's say, legislation that is at the big stage, so that you're able to anticipate, okay, this is coming, what do we need to do probably to prep ourselves to address the regulatory risk when they come into effect. I think it's a good thing to do.
So maybe just to ask, you mentioned something, Peter, you talked about the global nature of this, that we actually are being pushed from a globalization perspective. Do you think that then, as a country and as a sovereign, you also have pressure to either be seen to also be pushing for regulation that is going step by step with what the rest of the nation are doing and the rest of the world are doing? As of course, especially if you have some partners who you want to appeal to. And then the opposite, of course, would be there is a risk for some countries to lock themselves out because of some regulations that they are pushing.
Thank you, Musa. Kenya has been known, I guess, globally and regionally as a fast mover in this country. So if you look at most of the international treaties and conventions, Kenya is usually among very fast to sign up. But I see the pressure coming from the first risk macro economic risks. So we are not in a very good position. I think driven by the fact that we had a huge debt in foreign currency denominated debt, which of course we know that the inflation of the dollar, it has just expounded that problem. And we feel the pinch. Our hands are tied up. Because we need help, we need intervention. We probably need even to borrow money. The conditions to doing some of these things then comes this kind of pressure. So prediction again, expect to see a lot more of this in the future going to 2020.
On the same, I see an opportunity to it. So the fact that everyone is being pushed in the same direction means that if you can have a global framework, so you can have a global framework for AML for your company, especially where you have a regional focus, or you have a global framework for data protection. So then you start to comply even before the regulation comes, because the regulation is coming, because you have to basically, you're a global company, you want to transact globally. So there is an opportunity to it in terms of standardization, means that then you just know that I need to apply myself to the highest standard, but there is a cost to it because all these compliance requirements come with a cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think before we move, like, you just mentioned about the cost, and I think it would be important for people to actually realize what's the cost benefit. So how much is enough? Maybe you can give us your take as practitioners. Of course, you've been advocating for some of these things where you've been in your career. How much is enough? How much is too much?
I think cost aside,
Yes.
it all comes down to the basics because you can have all the sophisticated GRC tools,
Yes.
governance
Yes.
risk and compliance tools,
Yes.
but you're actually not optimizing it or using the value. So you can actually have like manual controls or manual processes
Yes.
that actually assist you
Yes.
to assist you to, let's say, do your controls or your risks and all that.
Yeah.
And it's actually working for you
Yeah.
within your confines. I think as a company becomes more mature, then they start seeing the value of investing in
Yeah.
such tools. Yeah, so it's different. I think for
Yeah.
the financial services sector, it's more or less a requirement by
Yes.
our regulators. So it's, yeah, you definitely have to invest in such tools. Yeah.
I think Mercy raises an important point.
Yeah.
Let's focus a little bit more on this. Just lately, the AML framework has been rolled out very aggressive. And we've been asking ourselves that question. So what for the smaller
Yes.
entities, what should they do? In
Yes.
terms of cost benefit, of course, they need to comply.
Yeah.
And the cost of compliance, again, going into the future, is just rising by the day. So an example I can give, one of the entities I work with in the insurance industry, they have been asked to appoint what we call the money laundering reporting officers. So they're writing back to the regulators and they can't afford to hire such a person.
Yes.
So the cost of compliance is dramatically going up.
Yes.
So we will see innovation and coming into that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Perhaps for sharing
Yeah.
some of this, because I know for the data protection,
Yeah.
organizations are allowed to share
Yes.
the data protection
Yes.
officers.
The officers, yes.
Yeah, or
Yes.
outsourcing.
Yes.
that
Yes.
kind of thing. Yeah, to
Yeah.
manage it.
And you know, yes.
So just on his point,
Yes.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see like a mail as a service being offered.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at the current issue around data protection, especially in Kenya, where we've been looking at, you see, I mean, even here, probably guys will be looking, have seen some banner telling them, give us consent for showing up to this webinar, and then these people putting posters that says, by you entering this,
You have
you're
consented.
consenting. When you come for my wedding, you've consented for me taking your photos, And so we're asking ourselves, so if that is not enough to meet the requirement for compliance, then what is it I need to do? What should I implement to meet the requirement and how much will it cost? And so then what point does it stop being of benefit? Right? I think it's interesting that just to touch on data protection a bit, there's also the concern, and I think you'll see it a lot, especially in people who use data to insurance, right? Now, there's a thin line between my, use of your data for purposes of using it, for purposes of me providing you value, providing the product, and also for me to be able to make my product better. And so it can be argued that the developed world has had a long time. Yeah, very intelligent systems and all these things. I mean, ChatGPT, you had the GDPR now. And so us, as people who are coming up and people who are trying to build intelligent systems, now that's what
data protection with innovation and see where they can meet.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
But laws are dynamic. They're not custom stored.
Yes.
So even as the new laws come in place, we have an opportunity to study their impact because, like risk, risk practitioners know that any risk identified, any risk mitigation proposed may have unintended consequences.
Yes.
So similar to the laws come with a lot of goodwill, but they have unintended consequences, such as the ones I'm talking about, stifling innovation and killing creativity. So hopefully, within the dynamic environment we operate, we'll be seeing some changes or flexing some of the laws to use them without compromising the principles.
Yes, that's good. That's good. I think that's a good way to segue into the next category of risk, which is around market disruption, competition, strategic alignment, and such issues. I think Stella, you can lead us there.
So when I was thinking about this risk of market disruption and the issues of macroeconomics, those are two very intertwined risks. So the thing is, you're being pushed on one side where people don't have money simply because of what is happening in the economy. So yourself as an organization needs to innovate and basically change how you're operating to make yourself more efficient. So we've seen things like, for example, the gig economy, which is now quite big. You've seen things like e-commerce and online shopping. You've seen the move from, right now, if I'm thinking about advertising, I'm not thinking about going to KTN or Nation. I am thinking about putting something on TikTok because digital is becoming so much bigger. So the flip side of the macroeconomic risk has been that there are a lot of opportunities that have showed themselves. And it has been, so recently I was traveling in the UK, and in the UK things are so efficient. So you'll find somebody who says, for me, I am a restaurant, I'm only going to do chicken, and I'm only going to have 5 products. Why? Because I want to optimize what I'm doing and I want to do what I'm doing very well. Or you have a lot of automation where you don't have people seated just waiting to receive a payment. If you look at, for example, our expressway, if this was in the UK, you would not have someone seated there waiting for a payment. You'd have a tap to pay option. So those are some of the things that to be more competitive, to be more strategic, people are moving there. If it comes to the financial services, we are getting a lot of financial services from our phone. We don't think about, I have to go to the bank and give 500 documents before I can get a loan. It should be something that I can get online. So as businesses, as SMEs, we are being challenged a lot more to think about what is our product and what am I good at, and reducing to what I am good at, and then delivering it in a way that I can be operationally efficient, whether that means using AI, using e-commerce and all those other things.
Thank you, sir. Maybe to hear from Celsius, Peter.
So market disruption, I think Stella has put it very well spoken. Maybe a risk, but let's reflect a little bit more on COVID-19. Because they're disruptive.
Yes.
But we saw a lot of opportunities coming from that one single point. New businesses, new ways of conducting business, just new ways of thinking. Prior to COVID, we hadn't thought that even people in the financial world could work from home.
Yes.
We thought the sensitivity of data, accessing this banking framework, insurance, what do you call it, the ERPs in the household. But we've seen a lot of that. So what we then should look at, yes, both as a risk, but also as an opportunity to generate new ideas, to be innovative, and to improve efficiency. So there is a lot of opportunity in market disruption as well, including creation of new markets and the cropping up of new customers. Yeah. So,
So we need something to add on to that?
Not really. I think for me, it's more of maybe a question to the viewers into what they think is the top risk affecting their organizations, because we're having an argument in a different forum as to if strategic risk should be known as the only top risk, because it then affects how you're going to disrupt the market, it's going to affect how you execute your operation, and all that. But I think what was coming out, like people view the risks that are key or top in the organizations as different. To you, as maybe the risk practitioner, the risk manager, you think maybe strategic risk is the main key or one of the key risks, but then maybe to the CEO, it's not a big impediment to that. Yeah. So
I think that's a good question, and I think if you don't have from us, just list your top risks. It would be good to see what the viewers think is the top issues that they face. I think the issue that you brought up, Martin, it's an interesting one, is where we're looking at there could also be market degradation and maybe just influx of people flooding into one market. You know, in fact, the COVID time when it started, remember the cost of masks and the sanitizer, and these things were crazy. Then it was, of course, a good opportunity, and everybody flooded in there. And then that market degraded. I don't know if those are some of the things that risk managers should be looking at and saying that the way we're going, you can see that this market, this particular product for this particular market, where it's going to be so commoditized and we probably need to pull out. And do risk managers do such contributions?
Yeah, depending on the market, you can do like stress analysis of the environment that you're working within, to be able to anticipate or say, let's say 2 years from now, we've been selling this product, but you can foresee that the volumes will start going down, and either you need to offload it or really package it, because it to be attractive, more attractive to now the current market or the future market.
So definitely an area for risk managers to contribute to.
Yes. I think also just looking at it from an SME perspective, I remember a long time ago, I was working in Safaricom. I will mention because that risk has come and passed.
Yes.
So one of the things is when M-Pesa started, if you noticed that the business to have was an M-Pesa agency.
Yes.
And everybody had an M-Pesa agency. But internally, the company had been thinking about how do we, rather than people withdrawing, so when you go to an agent, you actually go to withdraw money. That removes money from the ecosystem. So the company was internally thinking about how do I retain money in the ecosystem. And that's how pay bill and buy goods, the tills came about. So for an SME out there, one of the things you have to look at, especially where you are, is it called upward integration and downward integration? So what is it that your supplier or your main partner is thinking? What is their strategy? And how do you fit in their strategy? So if, for example, your partner's strategy is changing, then you need to be able to be adaptable, because I know a number of millionaires who are M-Pesa millionaires, but now, because they didn't change with the changing times, that risk came and hit them.
Let me just a small point to add. So if you're seated there as a risk practitioner within your company, and your company does not have an innovation desk or that kind of function, perhaps it's high time you then issue a advisory against what Mercy and Stella said, that companies can no longer sit comfortably with a business as usual approach. Because you don't know what is happening to the thinking around the product or service that you're offering in the
Yes.
market. And what either the customer or the suppliers or anybody else is thinking about changing. And you may change overnight.
Yes.
So the example Stella has given about Safaricom wanting to retain money within the ecosystem
Yes.
was a game changer for them and as well for the agencies. So
Yes.
as companies, we need to consistently evolve in this dynamic world. So at CPF, for example, where I work, we set up an innovation desk a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So they are charged with consistently doing market surveys, market research, and tweaking the products that we offer, the
Yes.
services and products that we offer, to meet a changing market or a changing customer out there.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I'm hoping that we will start thinking about such things.
Yes.
Tomorrow, your supplier wants to do your work. It's a lot of business. And this like those distributor wants to go straight to the market.
Yes.
So pass you as a retailer. And those kind of things are definitely a key issue for us to think about. So now the last area of risk is cybersecurity. Maybe Martin, just let you lead us in this discussion. Yeah, this is very broad. I'm really going to try and reflex you. Just lead the way.
Yeah, so in terms of cybersecurity, looking at the year that we've had, so for Kenya, I think the most notable thing was Anonymous Sudan.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, everyone was talking about.
Yeah.
And just looking in hindsight, a few years back, nobody was thinking about cybersecurity as a key risk for very many organizations until WannaCry happened.
Yes.
Then the ransomware came into effect, and then people started, okay, this is becoming a bit more. Then now COVID happened, and it accelerated some of the cyber and information security risks that companies and organizations were facing. And with that in mind, then boards had to also now become a bit more looking into cyber investments for the various organizations that are in place, and now also having visibility of what cyber risks are affecting the various organizations. So Anonymous Sudan, I think for Kenya, brought it to the forefront that there are also nation-state attacks.
Yes.
But looking in hindsight, it also got us thinking, what is the government doing in terms of trying to protect our crown jewels,
Yes.
such as eCitizen, because it had a ripple effect in terms of M-Pesa, and you can see the banks as well got affected. We couldn't, it's like our economy at some point was at a standstill. We couldn't pay for items, it was stuck in the supermarket or the likes, and then it was a big thing. So I know that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. There's the NC4, which is the National Computer Cybercrime Center, Coordination Center, and the various ministries, so the KESAT that sits under the Communications Authority, working behind the scenes to ensure that, and of course the discipline forces as well, where I think the cyberspace sits under the defense forces.
Yes.
So there's a lot of collaboration, but what I've liked about the government is that they're also bringing private sector into that space. So like bodies like Isaka Kenya and other computer societies are getting called into meetings, into forums to be able to discuss such things and how we can also add our insight or our expertise into such areas. I think maybe one thing that probably people don't know is that the Israel and Hamas war, the Palestine war, there's also a lot of cyberspace attacks that's happening in the background, because people are actually focusing on the physical war.
Yes.
But the first few weeks, actually, there were like serious attacks between both parties.
Yes. Yes.
The Hamas were able to do something similar like Anonymous Sudan to the Israeli government some of the government parastatals, and were able to disseminate false information about that there are some areas that are being hit, and then now that was a bit of panic with some of the citizens and all. So it's an interesting area. A lot has happened within the year, but I think for companies we have to ensure that we are training, we have the right personnel to be able to investing in cybersecurity. And if you're not able to, then outsourcing is one of the other options. But with outsourcing then comes other risks like third-party risks that now eat into your supply chain, because at the end of the day, accountability rests with you as an organization. As much as you've outsourced some of these things, you now have to assess these suppliers and third parties that you have in your space. So there's a lot under the cyber security space within our own organization, and as risk practitioners, we need to ensure that we are also upskilling ourselves, but we're also looking at the key risks, even internally, because most of the time, sometimes when cyber incidents happen, it's because it's as a result of, let's say, negligence of our own internal staff. So there's a lot of training that needs to happen, a lot of upskilling of our IT and cybersecurity resources and the likes.
Good. Maybe just a small addition. I have to confess that, as an entity, we have done a lot in terms of strengthening our security. So we separated and lowered the risk of cybersecurity. Because every 2 or 3 years we do a pen test. We train the staff, and we were generally not too vulnerable to cyber attacks. But I think what Anonymous Sudan taught us is that cyber security threats emanate externally. So one of the things then we need to think about as risk managers in terms of advisory to our organizations is how do we warn the organization of the effects of cyber attacks outside the organization. So e-citizen is down. Can you imagine if Safaricom is down and you are reliant on Safaricom as an organization for some of your service delivery? So you could be secure internally, I think, as Mercy mentioned, but you are not too secure in terms of service delivery if your partner is hit by cyber. So mitigation for that, of course, you can mitigate it, but you probably need to plan. And I guess this is a business continuity process. What happens if cybersecurity threats hit those whom you rely on? So bigger debate, because I must confess, I have really rated this risk very low on risk register because we are ready for cyber, but I was not thinking about it externally. So we need to broaden. Okay, interesting.
And just to, thinking about what the things that are recently I was in a discussion where the main thing that was so being able to say there's information sharing, we are able to cascade an attack very well and contain it very well. We are still not there as an institution, and our third parties. So you can be a very big financial institution, but you're depending on a small integrator who is doing for you just something very small, very basic. But he's the one who brings the threat into your organization. So thinking through, and again, you bring in the issue of cost, that the bigger players may be able to secure their environment and feel secure, but the threat can come from anywhere. And if my neighbor is not well secured and is connected to me, then brings a threat to me.
You raised an interesting point. I think it was Must talk about the issues of misinformation. And I don't know if you guys think, especially considering the world we live in now, we talk about things like deepfakes, where suspicion you would be on YouTube now, telling people, to get their funds out quickly, and you know what I mean. And that's the world we live in right now. It doesn't even just have to be people to be, bots, spreading misinformation. And I don't know how you feel, especially in this part of the world, how big of an issue this is.
It's already here with us.
Yeah.
So I think Kenya regionally is very sophisticated in terms of we're usually early adopters in terms of new technologies coming out. So we have to face the reality that these things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Like somebody can come and clone your voice,
Yes.
the like. So it's now starting. I think there was a task force that was formed recently to deal with AI and start thinking about what regulations we can have in that space. So I think it's an area where the government needs to probably put in more efforts to address that. But maybe to your point also, Stella, we actually have, I think, an incident framework as a country that sits under one of the bodies that is under Communications Authority. I think the problem is for like SMEs, they don't actually know that if, let's say, you're hit by ransomware, where should I report? Because you now start looking for maybe local solutions, but that is available to you to be able to report directly to the KESAT, to be able to now assist you in terms of seeing how they can recover. Yeah, so I think there's a lot that maybe marketing that needs to be done by the government to be able to show, to showcase maybe to the smaller enterprises that this is available and they should actually be reporting to them, because there are a lot of companies that get hit, but we actually don't get to know about them, and probably it could be also a learning experience for other organizations as to how they were hit and what they can do, what we can do to secure ourselves. Yeah.
So there's this saying about, there's nothing new under the sun. I don't know, from a point of view of cybersecurity and maybe the things we've seen in 2023, has there been anything new under the sun? Yeah.
We get, as in, it's things we talk about,
Yes.
but then when it happens, then we act on surprise.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it happened.
And maybe just to your point, having looked at your environment and said that we've covered everything. So the anticipation was that the only thing that can come in will be something different, something new. Yeah. And I think we have to really go back ways to see something new. It's always been the same old threats. Just the purpose and package, but they still manage to hit us. Interesting, if you look at the statistics, the most prevalent threats are ransomware, because it gets a lot of media, all that. But the good old business email compromise still makes the biggest numbers in terms of the financial impacts on businesses. So again, same old thing under the sun, especially cybersecurity. I think guys need to just get away from that feeling that there's going to be something very complex, something very new. There's somebody who's sitting in a basement somewhere who is really a genius. So they come up with this very clever exploits, right? I think mostly it's about our own internal weaknesses again. So having talked about what went wrong in 2013, why don't we now start to think about the future, so that at least we can start to think about the things that I imagine maybe even already we're starting to see them, and then we're expecting that they will probably be more prevalent in the coming years. Maybe let me start with this discussion. We have the issue around climate risk. I know you mentioned it a bit speaking earlier. If you can just take us through what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Thank you again, Musa. Let's begin with the basics. I think we're living in interesting times, and we have not, many individuals and corporates haven't appreciated climate risk. But where is the climate risk coming from? So for the benefit of those who may be new to the whole area. So climate risks, of course, associated with climate change. And scientists tell us that climate change is really driven by the rising temperatures across the globe. Why the rising temperatures? Over the past about 200 years since we discovered industrialization, we started emitting greenhouse gases into the ozone, which naturally then gets trapped. The surface temperature of the earth gets hotter and hotter. But why should anybody care about that? That's just what we're asking ourselves. And we haven't found the connection till now where we should care about it, because rising temperatures have devastating effect globally, to the individual, to countries, to corporates. And this is the time we're beginning to realize those kind of effects. So I saw the UN Secretary General the other day making a visit to the north. Just observing how the ice bags there are melting because of the rising temperatures. The effects of which they are saying by the end of the century, scientists predict it will go on the same. Global temperatures will have risen by about 3 degrees centigrade. The effect would have been melting most of the icebergs in the north.
Yes.
And the coastal cities across the world as we move will disappear literally underwater.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Displacement. Displacement comes with it poverty because you're displacing people from their livelihoods, from their homes. Where do they go? They become refugees or sorts.
Yes.
So, I mean, if you start analyzing the impact of climate change, at an individual level, yes, there will be poverty. There will be hunger, there will be disease because part of climate change then means erratic weather patterns.
Yes.
I think we've already started experiencing that. Growing up, I think we'll easily predict the weather. We knew it would rain in March for this long, this amount of rainfall that would happen. This year, March, we had a failed rain season. So we had famine at the beginning of the year. Now, just last month, the short rains became the long rains, and El Nino ensued, and there was flooding, and there was all this devastation around the flooding, whether it's destruction of infrastructure and roads, obviously crop failure or harvesting failure, because not many crops will survive with that much water. So what are we anticipating then? In the next season, we may not have some of the basic goods, food, and Kenya is largely agricultural economy. So if there is erratic climate, it means a large portion of our economy will be affected. So it will come to aggravate the macroeconomic risks that we talked about. So climate change, climate risk is one. It's here we better start thinking of how to deal with it. Fortunately, I think there has been a lot of initiatives across the globe to try and tackle climate change. I mean, as we speak, I think the COP28 is happening, which was voted by the UN, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, to try and tackle this problem head on. However, from a risk management perspective, what should we be advising our organization? The true effect of the mitigations which have been proposed is that Africa, which was on the verge of going towards industrialization, has been slowed down. Why? We can't be seen to be the ones emitting greenhouse gases where the rest of the world is being told to stop. So there's a net zero agenda. Coming clean on pollution and emission. So we probably need, and we have no choice because a lot of global interdependencies come in. So if we choose to emit, then we will miss out opportunities of foreign investors coming into the country. We will miss the opportunity of a lot of the money that we need for infrastructure and development coming into the country. So we are between a rock and a hard place. So perhaps what risk managers need to do is a full assessment of, for me, opportunity. Where can we leverage opportunity on climate risk? We are already moving towards solar and other forms of renewable energy. So as much as we are looking at climate risk from a risk perspective, there's a lot of opportunities for our corporates to hope on early enough and to leverage climate change and climate risk for the better of the organization. So a good example is very simple, I think, solarization of a lot of companies. We saw Total taking lead. They decided that no longer rely on the grid. So is that something that we think about early enough? The whole conversation about electric vehicles and e-mobility is coming into force quickly. Are we advising our companies in terms of how to open to that conversation? And then lastly, Musa, is something we had as a conversation just last week during our conference at IRM, transition risks. Transition risks, and the example we were given, which I want to give here, we had the president the other day saying that within the next year or so, all borders, motorcycles, will be electric. So for the SMEs who have already invested in borders, so what are they going to do with the fuel-based or diesel-based borders? So these are transition risks for a lot of organizations, not just SMEs, but also in the mainstream companies. We need to advise our companies, entities in terms of how to transit this climate risk and mitigation conversations. Yeah.
But interesting, that we're seeing regionally push from Uganda to do more investment in the fossil fuels. Tanzania is looking at doing more natural gas. So again, as you rightly said, we need to think about investments in green energy and things like those. But for countries who are not seeing a lot of money coming in to help them to invest in those things, they're then looking at what they can lower my energy costs by exploiting this natural resources that I have. So then again, it becomes a really difficult conversation. Yeah. So what are we saying about that? Yeah.
Interestingly,
Yes.
and I don't know if you remember, so we were bidding for some work from this big country, company, and they asked us, what are we doing about sustainability?
Yes.
So more and more, and we also help a data center manage their ISO 27, and they are moving more towards green technologies because their counterparties on the other side are asking them, what are you doing to be more sustainable? So the pressure again is not only coming from it's also just the you and me's of this world who are putting pressure on companies to be more sustainable and to show what are they doing to be more effective. So it's an interesting discussion as well.
Yeah, I think even for us, we've been getting, like when we're doing like some of our supply assessments, some of the questions we are asking, and also for us the same thing when we're bidding for jobs, we're getting asked, what are you doing about your sustainability? Do you have policies in place and stuff like that? And for me, I think about 8 years ago, sustainability was kind of like a new concept. I think it was only Safaricom and KCB who were doing it at the time, like the sustainability reports. And like I was in that space, but then Kenya, okay, for me at that point, I was like, Kenya is not ready. It was not like a career that I would have pursued in it. But now, look at us now. We are here. Like for us, our board has asked us to now start assessing ESG risks and actually now we have to start now building what are the metrics that we'll be reporting into to that. So maybe a question to you, Speaker. Especially for financial services, would you rate climate risk as a risk on its own or ESG? Under ESG, because then under ESG there are now other things other than like climate risks or environmental risks that come into play.
So my own take, we go for ESG because ESG is a wider conversation. It's only that climate risk is noisier than the rest. But I mean, to look at it holistically, we need to really map out ESG risks for a balance, because remember, this conversation has been a long-term conversation. We began by corporate social responsibility. We are trying to act responsibly as companies, giving back to society and minimizing harmful effects to not just the environment, but to society. Issues of child labor, issues of fair pay to the people we work with, and even along the supply chain, directly the people we work with. So I think if we are to stick to that long-term conversation of being responsible as entities, then the ESG risk would be a better approach to this.
I think that's brilliant. So then you take, it becomes the opportunity as you're managing risk, then you have an opportunity to actually give back to your community which you serve. Interesting. Actually, you probably would be the next person I want to hear from in terms of critical infrastructure. We suffered national blackouts. Kenyans blame Ugandans. Ugandans keep failing to give us power. We get into blackouts. We have people who are in a society called Kenya Remes, so we have critical infrastructure. So what are we looking at there?
So I think it's a timely conversation. I think before I came here, us guys still don't have power. So and I think maybe a bit of context in terms of what is a critical infrastructure, and the Kenyan government under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act has come up with draft regulations, and they were up for public participation this year. And those regulations have defined what they deem as critical infrastructure, anything that will affect certain sectors and affect the citizens from affecting certain services. And so some of the sectors are financial services, specifically banks and payments. There's the energy sector, so electricity is one of them, water, and the like. So there are various sectors that have been classified as critical infrastructure. And those sectors have to comply with the regulations that have been put in place once they come into effect. One of the things that, one of the rules of the regulations is proposing that each of the critical infrastructure, like if you have a critical infrastructure within your entity, you have to have a chief information security officer. So if you don't have that right now, it's something that we were talking about earlier, like doing an impact analysis and starting to anticipate that once this thing comes into effect, you now start to see, because most of the time, as hospitals say, it becomes effect like almost immediately.
Yes.
So if you don't have a CISO, then now you start now wondering or appointing somebody maybe to fill in that capacity. So those are some of the things that we need to anticipate as risk practitioners in advance to see. And especially if you're in the IT space, or if you have an IT department and you're in those categories or those sectors that are deemed as critical infrastructure, I would urge as risk practitioners to go and just have a look at those regulations and start anticipating what you need to put in place to be able to ensure. Because there's also going to be audits. Yes. And now the government can come and actually audit you based on what they put in the regulations. So looking at critical infrastructure, as a country, I think there is a lot more that we can do because some of the failures that have happened, like say this, are things that probably we could anticipate. Or is it that we're just doing, desktop exercises, to tick a box in terms of our business continuity practices? You're saying yes, we have a BCP, but then when it actually comes to implement it, we are not actually, we can't even recover from such incidences, and it's honestly an embarrassment. But looking now into our own organizations, what are your critical infrastructure and what do we, how are you protecting that infrastructure? Because if you don't, then you either be liable to now or susceptible to attacks, cyber attacks, information security attacks, or even just environmental attacks. Let's say we have floods somewhere and that affect the critical infrastructure if there are temple. So those are some of the things that I think we should anticipate coming in the near future. And already happening even as we speak. So there's a lot more that we can do in that space as practitioners.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned, which I just want to add something about, is when you talk about the practice of putting in a plan B and then how can you test whether that plan B works or not. I know the BCI has simulations. Yeah, maybe Sana can mention something about the simulations that people can maybe use and how and that help in terms of there are some things you can't test. For example, if you're in a telco, you probably can't pull your mask down and say we're testing that there's a situation where this mask is down, but maybe you could simulate such things that can give you some insight about the preparedness of your teams. Yeah.
So from a business continuity perspective, when it comes to testing, there are different levels of testing. So there's desktop testing, there's a simulation, there's a full failover. And as the more complex it is, the more risk to your organization is. So I will just maybe use something that KA said. So one of the things they said is after this disruption that happened, that their 2 generators failed to power up. Now, a lot of things may have gone wrong. So it could have been something as simple as they bought bad fuel, or a simple component is, down. So when you're doing simulations, what you would do is think of a scenario. So the scenario would be like, for example, extended downtime of KPLC. Then how do I respond to that? If, for example, I don't have a specific component how would I be able to get it, and how long would it take? So in terms of simulation, what it helps you to do is, first of all, understand your level of preparedness, and then understand your recovery time. So how long will it actually take me to recover, and is it acceptable to my business? It can also help you to understand what else do I need to invest in. So doing some simulations in your business, especially of worst case scenarios, then helps you to be better prepared. I remember we were talking to a bank and we were doing business continuity audit. So we were talking to the finance department, and basically for their finance department, the treasury department that is, they were like, okay, if the IT system is not there, then what do? We are going to fail over to the DR. So I asked them that just this simple thing, what if both the primary and the DR are affected? And for them, they said, then we are all, basically we are dead. Yeah. And they didn't even want to think about the scenario. So, simulations and what if analysis basically help you think about the worst case scenario. And in that worst case, what would I do?
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. And it's worth investment. So we're looking now at things like AI helping you to simulate, and as I say, the worst case scenario, because it's very difficult for you to actually enact a worst case scenario. I mean, you'll be kicked out of the room as a risk manager trying to say, let's make sure all the systems are down and let's just see how that will work, right? So let's to take it to the next point. We talked about data protection quite a bit as we were talking about the compliance and regulatory issues.
Yeah.
But what do you think is something worth thinking about?
So when I was thinking about this, I thought about what are the key things that people struggle with when it comes to data protection. And some of the things that I've heard from people. So first of all, consent. How do I get and obtain consent? We've seen a lot of people thinking about, if I'm at an event, does it mean if I put a poster there, it's enough? If, as you're saying, I have collected your data for one product, can I then move it over to the next product? So what does consent mean? And generally, how can I get and obtain consent? The second thing that people are struggling with is third parties. So you can just, the same way you talked about cybersecurity, yourself, you can have done your DPIAs, you can have done your controls assessment, but your third party who you're passing on information to may not be that thorough.
Yes.
That party could be as simple as you have a HR software and that HR software is maintained by somebody else. Or it could be as simple as your physical security is handled by a security company which collects IDs at your gate. So thinking about the third party risk and thinking about how do I make sure that my third parties are well informed on what data protection is all about, and then that they have the appropriate controls. The other thing that people struggle with is incident identification and notification. So you had the other day that the ODPC basically said that NIVAS failed to report within 72 hours. So what does that mean for you as an organization? Do you have an idea of when an incident is happening? Can you be able to collect forensics to find out where did this incident emanate from? And basically, are you able to show that you have the appropriate controls in place? So incident identification, notification, escalation is something that people struggle with. And lastly is just having an inventory of all the personally identifiable information that you have in your organization. So I remember just, in the UK, it's as serious as for the Business Continuity Institute. One of the things they told us is that they cannot give us information regarding our members in East Africa because of GDPR.
Yes.
So, understanding Where exactly do you have information? Who has that information? Why do they have that information? It could be as simple as maybe your receptionist keeps a register of this is the person who called, this is their phone number, this is who they wanted to talk to, and she's keeping it in a paper in her desk. If you don't have visibility about that information, it could be the source of a leak. So as organizations, those are the key things that I would be worried about. And then just bringing in what Sospita said, that as we go along, enforcement will become more aggressive. So, and we've seen that the enforcement is not for the big players. We've seen Roma School, which was a school in Hiru. We've seen Casavera, which was, you see, on Wong Road. We've seen a number of White Path, which was a fintech. So enforcement is all encompassing. And as people even get more educated about data protection, there will be more complaints. So we should expect it, and we shouldn't really sit back and say, I'm a small institution, this thing is not for me. So just being prepared either way.
I don't know what you think, and maybe let me open it to all the panelists. Talk about the fact that it's going to be more and more aggressive. We've seen with the GDPR, the member countries in the EU, we've got to a point where individuals are actually having to appear in front of the supervisory authorities, and we're seeing fines being levied to actual individuals. I don't know if you see that happening in this region in the near future.
I saw one case being discussed in the privacy group where it was a gentleman and his wife, or they had basically, they were in court.
Yes.
And one of the things that she produced was screenshots and things that she had obtained from his mobile phone,
Yes.
but without consent.
Yes.
And they were disallowed. So definitely from a personal, from a personal perspective, I think there is possibility that those kind of breaches. I mean, we've seen people, like for example, where I release, let me say, not so favorable pictures of you.
Yes. Yes.
I can take you. Yes, I can take you to court.
Yes.
As a breach of privacy.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
If you had given your consent.
Yeah.
But I guess a little bit more research here. But
Yeah.
True. I think those things are finding their ways to the ODPC. However, there's another court. It's called the court of small fines.
Yes.
So I guess personal matters
Yes.
would be ideally referred to them.
Yeah.
I guess the ODPC will focus more on corporate issues. But what you're saying is true. I mean, Kenyans as citizens are much more aware of the requirements of the law. So either way, whether it will go to the ODPC or to the court of small fines,
Yes.
it will find its way where individuals are actually having to answer for breach of privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who wants to spell the rumor? WhatsApp admins, are they in trouble?
So interesting. So we have CCTV in our building,
Yes.
and I don't know if it's WhatsApp or it's just like I usually think about it and I'm like, these things never used to happen when we were small, but there are always incidences, and now the people don't realize, oh, there's CCTV monitoring. So the WhatsApp admin will say, people stop doing this because then someone will say, release the photos so we embarrass them.
And the photos are being made public.
So luckily for him, I think they had thought about it, and he said, no, I won't release the photos, but please stop doing XYZ.
Yes.
We have seen you on the CCTV. So I think WhatsApp admins also need to be quite, switched on data protection.
The rumor about you being held liable for what the people in your WhatsApp group are doing as the admin, Should people be worried about becoming entrepreneurs?
Given consent.
Yeah.
Join the group.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think also the fact that some of these practices we do would be considering your own security, things like CCTV camera surveillance. We know we have nanny cams in the house and things like
Yes.
those. But then how much is too much?
Yeah.
And are you making yourself a data controller without knowing, right? So interesting. I think it would be a very nice way to segue into the next topic, which is around introduction of new technology. And I think Mercy can take us into that conversation.
Yeah, so looking at new technologies that are coming in, of course, the big one right now is artificial intelligence, AI. But looking into the future, quantum physics and quantum computing is coming, is also something that we are anticipating into the future. So right now, the other technology that I would say, which is a big thing right now, and even in the short span of the next year, is cloud computing. So those are the two I'd like to focus on. In terms of AI, it's bringing a lot of opportunities for businesses to be able to automate certain tasks that are probably repetitive. And then you are able to now have the staff probably who are doing that now handle other exercises that are not necessarily done by a computer, or that they can now focus their energies on something else. So it's bringing opportunities, but it's also bringing risks into the organization. And some of the risks is, especially where you're handling customer data or personal information, you have, let's say, you're not restricted the use of such tools as ChatGPT to your staff. Then if somebody wants to use, let's say, tell him to write a script or something, and feeds that information on client's data, then it becomes now a big risk, because it's using the AI models are using that information, that client's data, to now, and every team members here to now start populate or make assumptions on stuff like that. And PwC had done a half-year report technically in the year. They've given an example of Samsung. They actually disclosed that there were, I think they had 3 leaks of data being fed into ChatGPT, and I think one called WarmGPT. So the ChatGPT incident was that someone used wanted ChatGPT to look at source code that they had done to check for errors, and it was proprietary information. So it's already now out there. The WarmGPT example was so WarmGPT is able to write phishing emails. So if you want to simulate an email, you just feed in data. You say, I want to hack, let's say, CPF. This way, this is the person who I want to, and if you do a very creative email that would seem that it's actually an cheating. But now they fed in the actual emails of the company, and so now again that data has been restored there. So such risks are things that we also have to be cognizant of, and as risk practitioners, we need now to start building, looking at working with either your legal or compliance departments where your data protection officers are sitting in, and you're able to now put in place policies and safeguards, and that you're actually checking that staff are not either abusing or inputting such information into such models, because you don't want to also restrict them. You have to get that balance, because if you don't use AI, then other people will. Other companies are still using it to make it to their advantage. There's this saying that if AI is not here to steal your job, but the person who learns how to use AI is the one who will steal your job. So if you don't, as a company and also as individuals, if you don't become proactive in terms of learning how to use it to your own advantage, and to assist your company to, let's say, automate tasks, then your competitors will do it. Yeah, then you start lagging behind and start playing catch up when they've already gone ahead. In terms of cloud computing, many companies are moving to that because it becomes a cheaper model in the long run. The initial cost is expensive, but looking at a long-term perspective, it becomes cheaper in the long run, because instead of buying these big servers that are sitting in your sites, it's a more conducive model. The challenge that comes with it is that with cloud computing, again, there are also now security risks that you also have to factor into, and that means having skilled practitioners who are skilled in terms of looking at that. So you will also need to have, like, let's say, IT risk auditors. Cloud computing is relatively new. So we don't have like somebody who has 10 years experience in cloud computing. So it's somebody who you have to now, like, you have to have a conscious investment to train these people. And invest it so that at the end of the day you're helping your organization and you're helping that person to have the skills, right skills to be able to now secure your cloud environment.
I think it's a very interesting conversation. Now, unfortunately, being told we're running out of time. So, so we just finish. So, Peter, I'm going to give you it's enviable or it's unenviable. Just talk us through mental health. And then I can give it to maybe take us in the Q&A session.
Okay, so thinking about mental health, this is one of those emerging risks, which 5-6 years ago nobody thought about.
Yes.
But why mental health? Again, where is it emanating from? So we're living in an interesting time where I would almost say we are overloaded in terms of information. So I think all of us here growing up, we didn't have this much access to information. But our kids, my kids were just on a trip out of town last week, and they met somebody who listened to them and was asking the guy who was with them, how old are these kids? They went for some tour somewhere, and they were talking about downloading an app, and creating a YouTube channel and all that. Like, and this guy out of town didn't quite follow the conversation. So this is a generation that is coming into us. Here now it's called Generation Z.
Yes.
And there's a new generation called Generation Alpha.
Yes.
Okay, so they are coming into the job market with a relatively high level of information compared to you and I, and compared to the generation that was there before. Having mentioned that, there was also issues of the evolving work dynamics. If you look at what COVID did to many organizations, to many individuals, lots of separation. So we were working from home. And I think a lot of mental health issues emanated during that season. Because for the first time, you had to be alone for a long time. And you were maybe paired with somebody when you were in each other's face longer than you usually are. and then coupled with that, the relative speed of change is now, I don't know how many times higher than it was 10 years ago. If you look at both physical gadgets and information, your phone, Stella just announced that she bought an iPhone. I don't know which iPhone it is. But when the phone started being manufactured, you stay a year or two before the versions to come. So iPhone 13, between iPhone 13 and 15, I don't know whether there's 16 now. Did you buy 16?
Next year.
It's been a span of less than a year. So the speed of change is relatively quick. What we are starting to witness now is the impact all these changes and the speed of change is having on the human brain and human interaction and all that. That's the whole issue of mental health. So I think we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg, so to be honest. So going into 2024 and the future years, it's an area that we really need to start taking care of, both at a personal level and at an organizational level, because organizational level, we're already starting to employ a lot of the Gen Zs. And we know the Gen Z culture and way of thinking is quite different from the other generation. In fact, even in terms of how they view work, they probably view work more tasks than what we were mentored to think 8 to 5 years, loyal to Sentinel for the next 30 years. My dad worked for his organization in the government for 35 years until he retired. Same department. I have worked for 5 entities so far, 6 entities. And I'm sure that these ones, may not be the last one. I may move on at some point.
We might come to Sentinel.
All this is having an impact on how human beings are naturally wired, because our brains haven't changed much. The brain is the same brain, but is having to accommodate so many changes. So mental health is likely to get heightened over time. And as companies, then we need to start thinking about how do we manage issues of mental health, how do we manage issues of the rate and speed of change before it negatively affects both the person, individual, and then multiply effect into the organization.
I think before I give it back to maybe in the general, especially that topic, and then we can also pick up quickly. Yeah. Okay. Good. So because of time, let me give it back to Bibi so that we can go into the Q&A session, and then we can wind up after that.
Thank you. So thank you so much. I think it's been quite an interesting conversation. The challenge with this conversation is that time will always come to the end of the session.
Yeah.
But I think we can always we are heading into a new year, so we'll definitely look at it and say what can we do, which conversation can we go to advance further.
Yes.
So thank you so much. We've had around 96 people. We started around 96 people. The first 30 minutes we had a challenge with sound, so we apologize for that, but now we're good. And I see we had asked earlier about some of the top risks in the organizations. So we have some people here answer back. I just read one or two. So Shelly was saying there is poor transitions in management. So this in the organization actually led to a 5-year unstable leadership. I think that particular transition and the investment portfolio was definitely affected. And then also CPA Nelson was saying cybercrime definitely. And I saw something interesting. He also mentioned corruption there as a risk. And then what we're talking about, ESG, geopolitical, misuse and abuse, I think a bit of mental health there, and wastage of public resources. From what Nelson is mentioning, probably is from a government organization. So just read some of those, and then something else interesting is incidences of undermining employees, a case of managers losing hope and staff feeling demoralized, is what Sophie is also talking about mental health. We are dealing with a slightly different generation, whom if you give pressure for a consecutive three days, it's not like us, you are going to lose them. So I think it's quite interesting. You need to figure out how now do you start managing, or how do you start interacting with those people, because in the next 5 years, they're going to be the managers, they're going to be the guys sitting in management. So thank you so much. If you have any question, probably you can just ask on chat, and then we won't be able to read all of them because of time. But allow me, as you ask those questions, allow me to ask the panelists to give the closing remarks. I think we've analyzed quite a number of risks, around 5 of them. And then we've also looked at the future. What do you really need to look at? You need to be aware of in the future that might really come up. Like say mental health. Right now, you might not think it's going to affect the employee or the business directly, but probably in a few years, it's going to be hitting directly even into your revenues. So it's something we need to start looking at. So we'll just ask the panelists to give us the closing remarks, and then from there we can close it. If there will be any question, we'll allow 1 or 2 questions, then close it. So we can start with the hospital.
So thank you, Rufus. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit in this panel of eminent persons. Musa, Mercy, Stella. So the discussions we are having is we often, default human thinking. We often think that some of these things are really okay until they catch up. So my encouragement, my challenge to the risk managers and practitioners out there, take the emerging risk seriously. I know Stella, Musa, you're always at hand, even from an ISACA perspective, to assist and help organizations manage the risks, especially when it comes to convincing stakeholders, because many of these risks require some budgetary and resource allocation. And internally, we face a lot of challenges trying to convince boards, like Boniface is saying, that mental health will be a real issue in the next 2 to 3 years. So let's start investing money in the mental health of our employees. So perhaps a word of encouragement, leverage on consultants, we're able to bring out the message even better than ourselves in order to manage, because the important thing is to manage the risks which are underlying and which may affect our organizations in a bigger scale in future. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Peter. We always appreciate you giving met second time now. And, we really love you in the BCI event. We really appreciate you for always coming through and having this important conversations. Then now we can also hear from Stella, your closing remarks.
So thank you again to the panel, and it has been quite an engaging conversation. I think as risk practitioners, there is a lot we can do in terms of information sharing. I was just sharing with Sospita that the IRM, the BCI, ISACA provide that framework where we can actually talk about these things, like what should we be thinking about now, what should we be thinking about in the next 5 years. To prepare for this discussion, we did a bit of review of, as the top companies in the NSE, what are they reporting in terms of the top risks? So from that, I can even tell you some of the companies who are forward thinking and some of the companies who are just thinking about, the normal run-of-the-mill, risks. So I agree with my colleague Source that, as an institution, you need to think, don't just think about what am I feeling now. Think about what is happening in the industry, what are my partners doing, what's the regulator doing, and then how can I use the limited resources? Because resources will always be limited, but there are ways in which you can manage risks. So what I would encourage is, that free thinking and basically expansion of mind.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you so much also for finding the time and for being here. I'm sure we've really gained a lot from the conversations we've had. Then, Mercy, closing remarks?
Thank you for having us, and also being in the student presence of industry leaders. I think for me, the two things for risk practitioners to become proactive in terms of adding value to the various organizations that they work in, and then collaboration. So collaboration both at organization level to be able to, it helps you to understand the view of the business, helps you to understand and anticipate what are the needs that, or the areas of focus that your organization should be focusing on. But also, just in hindsight, given that we have also the IRM represented in BCI, as ISACA Kenya, we're looking forward to collaboration with you guys. And I would say all the three institutions here represented, as well as Sentinel, do a lot of research in terms of risk management. We offer a lot of trainings, we offer a lot of certifications in terms of risk management. So it's up to you to take advantage of that. There are a lot of white papers that are released by ourselves and our global bodies that you can take advantage of. As ISACA Kenya, we run a scholarship program for guys who are interested in specifically cybersecurity related degrees, but as also as IT risk practitioners. So we finished the second cycle, but we'll have another cycle in March thereabouts next year. So you can be on the lookout and check us out on LinkedIn or our website, and we'll be able to get that information. So thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mercy, for even agreeing to be here. I think I met Mercy even before she was elected. And then, that time she was doing campaigns, and I told her I will invite you. I told her you will be president. And you are, I will invite you to a conversation. So thank you so much for agreeing to come. It's an absolute pleasure. Then before I give Musa, who is going to give the final remarks and close for us, there are two questions that I would like us to look at. Just allow our audience, can you allow us to just take these two, and then the rest we will follow up with you. So number one, the person is saying thanks a lot for the insights. It was quite informative. So can you advise on the risk of using customers and customer numbers to inform them of ongoing promotions in a company? These M-Pesa numbers are to be obtained from the various team numbers. Yeah. So I don't know what you think. He's saying he has a till number, and definitely the till number has M-Pesa numbers. So can you pick those numbers and start giving people promotions about his product? Does he have consent? What do you think, Stella?
So here we go back to the issue of consent, just what you were talking about. So when I go and I'm at your shop and I give you my, or rather I pay for an item using my M-Pesa, and out of that you get my number. The reason for which you have gotten that number is basically for me to enable payment of that transaction. I have not given you that number to be able to, for you to reach me from a promotional perspective. So when it comes to issuing advertising to persons, you need to have consent and it needs to be explicit, which is the reason why these days, for example, on websites, they will ask you, can I send you promotional material about XYZ, and you tick yes or no. So from a data protection perspective, no, he can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also think, I don't know whether Safaricom has now started deducting the numbers. If you have a business deal, you can't see the full number. You can see, like, they don't see the full information.
Yeah.
And that would be the reason as why some of the reasons are different.
Actually, it's even bigger than promotions, because we've seen some restaurants actually do this, where once you've gone, you've had your meal, and then time to pay, especially if you pay using your M-Pesa, immediately you send your number, a survey, to rate how you felt the services that have just been very well. Again, the problem there is that the principle is a purpose application. The purpose for which you collected that PII, once that purpose changes, you need to have a legal basis for that change. So if there's none, then you have to get consent. So remember, when you talk about consent, consent is just one of the many bases we have for processing personal data. You have actually other basis. So if you don't have any other basis, then you go for consent, right? So again, that's what I would tell him. And especially the law is very clear about marketing. Promotions falls under marketing. So if you're going to use that PII for marketing purposes, then you have to get consent for that. Yeah.
Great. So it's then let's see. Someone else is asking, do you foresee opportunities for carbon credits in Kenya, and what could be the potential risks for it? Any thoughts? Do you foresee opportunities for carbon credits in Kenya, and what could be the potential risks for it?
I think I could be wrong, but we're already there. We are already there. So it's not about potential. I think we saw the Saudis coming here early in the media, and carbon credits worth several billions. So what we actually seen in the market, and I think CMA announced the other day, they're putting in place a framework to allow trading in carbon credits, so that we have a formalized market. But I think what we saw early in the year was a voluntary trade, willing buy, willing sell. So we'll have both that kind of an arrangement, voluntary and regulated. Now, the key risks perhaps we need to think about, not too major, but there's the terminology on greenwashing. Yes, I think that's the major danger around this whole area, where people hide behind bad behavior, so to say, and then create a facade that they are very good because they are donating or buying carbon credits, while at the same time still continuing with the mission and all that. But there's bigger opportunities, especially for Kenya and many organizations. I think one of the things I would want to point out, and our president has been very vocal on it, we're one of those countries. If you compare Kenya and South Africa, for example, South Africa is almost 90% coal-based in terms of power generation. Kenya, we are almost green when it comes to power generation in the main grid. So hydro, geo, and solar, and a bit of wind as well. So very little diesel powered electricity generation. So it's an opportunity for the country to leverage, and for organizations which are also going to leverage in terms of further funding and revenue generation.
Thank you so much. So allow us to end on that, but before I end it, you say final remarks.
Okay, thank you, Migri. So I think first of all is to thank the panelists for gracing us with your presence. So and just to appreciate that you're not just here in personal capacity, but also you have decided to be here to represent your professional associations. So I really want to thank IRM, which is the Institute of Risk Management, you being represented by Sospita. I want to thank Business Continuity Institute, Eastern Africa, represented by Stella. I want to thank ISACA, Kenya chapter, represented by Mercy. So that is not a small thing for them to be here and for them to share this information with us. I think the viewers should be aware that these are membership associations, so people join and become members, right? And the information is available online, and it's free, not free, but it's what the word I'm trying to use is non-discriminatory, right? Anybody who's a professional can then apply for membership and then join that membership. And we're talking about global organizations, so they're not just regional, but they are global, represented regionally. The other thing I'd like to talk about is from the discussions we've had today and for people who joined in, it sometimes can be a daunting task to plan your career ahead, and you're trying to understand between making decision 1, 2, 3, which one should I go for first, how should I prioritize, and having these conversations with people who've been there before helps you to understand especially what employers are looking for, right? So that can help you to prioritize what you're going to, put your scarce resources to. And I think it is important to try as much as possible to reach out, talk to individuals, as I said, join the membership bodies, get the certifications that you've had today, and this can help you to give you a leg up in terms of the career. Another thing, just to also give you some hope. Most of us have been in this for more than 15 years. I think what I keep learning more and more is that there's more and more learning, right? And so therefore that means that you're not going to be perfect, and then perfection should not be the aim, right? So the thing is, start from where you are, have the mindset of continual improvement, and we shall always be better tomorrow than we were today. Right? I think with that, those few remarks, I'd like to thank you again very much, and thank the viewers for joining and giving us your time, and then give it back to Midway and for final any comments finally and to finalize the webinar. Thank you.
Good. So thank you so much, everyone of you who attended the webinar today. We really appreciate you taking the time. The 96 of you we started with, we really appreciate that. And then thank you so much. You can even continue connecting with our panelists online. You can find Sospita on LinkedIn, Sospita Thiga. And then you can also find Stella Makona Simiyu on the LinkedIn. You can also find Mercy, there's Mercy Molo on LinkedIn, and also Musa Wesutsa on LinkedIn. So let's keep the conversation going. And also for us at Sentinel Africa, you can also follow us on LinkedIn, and we are going to be able to continue this conversation further. So we really appreciate it. And then, we've taken around 10 minutes of the time. We really appreciate Sentinel Africa for this opportunity, and the camera crew are behind the cameras. Thank you so much for the work. And then we definitely, when we get into next year, we are going to still continue doing more and more webinars, be able to even share on what specifically you guys would want us to do, to which topics you want us to even go further into. And from there, we'll definitely continue the conversation. So thank you so much. I would want us to end it at that, and really appreciate you. And until we see each other next time, may God bless you. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas and Happy New 2024.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.